I woke up in a cold, sterile room with the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor keeping me company. The world felt blurry, like I'd been submerged in water and was just coming up for air. My body ached from the surgery, 3 grueling hours under the knife to remove a tumor that had been a ticking time bomb. They told me I'd be in recovery for a while, and I believed them. What I didn't expect was how the emotional scars would outpace the physical ones. Vanessa wasn't there. That was the first thing I noticed when my vision cleared. I'd fallen asleep holding her hand, but now my fingers clutched empty air. For a moment, I told myself she'd probably gone to grab a coffee or check on Lily. After all, Lily was our world. Our bright-eyed, chatty, 8-year-old daughter who loved to draw pictures of us as a happy family. The thought alone was enough to calm me, at least for a little while. "Mr. Carter, are you feeling any pain?" the nurse asked, interrupting my thoughts as she adjusted the fluid dripping into my arm. "Not really," I replied, though it wasn't entirely true. My chest felt heavy, and not just from the surgery. Did my wife say where she went? The nurse's cheerful expression faltered just slightly, and her words came out too carefully. "She said she had to step out with your daughter. She got a call and left about 2 hours ago." That gnawed at me. A call? What kind of call could pull her away from my bedside when I was barely out of anesthesia? My mind raced through a dozen possibilities. Maybe there was an emergency. Maybe it was something urgent. But wouldn't she have told me if it was? I reached for my phone, only to find the side table empty. Vanessa must have taken it. The nurse must have seen the confusion in my eyes because she smiled softly and said, "She mentioned she'd be back soon. I'm sure it's nothing to worry about." But I was worried. Something about it didn't sit right. Vanessa was the kind of woman who prided herself on being dependable, especially when it came to Lily and me. In all our years of marriage, I'd never known her to leave without a solid explanation. And now, at a time when I needed her most, she was gone without a word. The hours crawled by, each second stretching longer than the last. My mind wouldn't stop spinning, replaying every interaction we'd had leading up to my surgery. Had I missed something? A clue? A sign? Vanessa had been supportive throughout my diagnosis and the lead-up to this procedure, or so I thought. She'd held my hand at every doctor's appointment and assured me everything would be okay. But now, doubt began creeping in, whispering questions I wasn't ready to answer. When the door finally opened, I looked up eagerly, expecting to see Vanessa and Lily walk in with some reassuring explanation for their absence. Instead, it was my surgeon, Dr. Evans. He came to check on me, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. "How are you holding up, Michael?" he asked, his voice steady as he scanned the monitors. "Physically? Fine, I guess. But my wife and daughter left hours ago. Did they say anything before they left?" He gave me a polite but puzzled smile. "I wouldn't know, but it's normal for family members to step out during long recovery periods. I'm sure they'll be back soon." That wasn't the reassurance I needed. By the time Dr. Evans left, my anxiety had grown into a full-blown throb. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Not just wrong, but terribly wrong. The nurse brought me lunch, but I could barely eat. My mind was too busy spiraling, imagining scenarios I didn't want to entertain. Vanessa and I had been married for over a decade, and while no marriage was perfect, I thought we were solid. Sure, we'd had arguments, who doesn't? But I never doubted her loyalty. Not once. Until now. It wasn't until the evening that I finally got a hold of my phone. It had been buried under some paperwork on the counter. I unlocked it with trembling fingers, half expecting to see a text or call from Vanessa explaining everything. There was nothing. No missed calls. No messages. Not even an update about Lily. I tried calling her, but it went straight to voicemail. The same thing happened when I tried Lily's number. Panic clawed at my chest as 1,000 scenarios flooded my mind. What if they'd been in an accident? What if they were in danger? Or worse, what if? I shook my head, refusing to let the darkest thoughts take hold. Vanessa loved me. She loved Lily. There had to be a logical explanation for all of this. I just needed to find it. But as the hours dragged on and the silence from her side grew deafening, I couldn't ignore the small, gnawing voice in the back of my mind anymore. It whispered what I'd been too scared to admit. Maybe the call wasn't an emergency. Maybe Vanessa wasn't who I thought she was. And maybe, just maybe, my life was about to unravel in ways I couldn't begin to imagine. The next morning, I was discharged earlier than expected. The doctors were reluctant, saying I needed more rest, but I insisted. I couldn't lie in that bed for another second. Not when every fiber of my being screamed that something was wrong. My body protested as I got dressed, each movement a sharp reminder of the surgery, but the pain in my chest wasn't just physical anymore. It was the gnawing ache of betrayal, even though I didn't have proof. Yet, when I finally got home, the house was eerily quiet. The usual warmth and familiarity were gone, replaced by an unsettling stillness. Lily's toys were scattered in the living room, exactly where she had left them. Her drawing pad was open on the coffee table, with half-finished sketches of what looked like our family. Me, Vanessa, and Lily, all holding hands. That image used to fill me with pride. Now, it felt like a taunt. Vanessa wasn't home. Neither was Lily. I checked the kitchen, the bedrooms, even the backyard, but there was no sign of them. My heart pounded in my chest as I grabbed my phone, scrolling through my call history and texts again. Still nothing. I called Vanessa's number, and once again, it went straight to voicemail. This time, I left a message, my voice laced with frustration and a barely concealed edge of panic. Vanessa, it's Michael. Where are you? Call me back as soon as you get this. I tried Lily's number next. The phone rang and rang before it, too, went a voicemail. I left another message, this time softer, trying to keep my voice steady. Hey, sweetie. It's Daddy. Just checking in. Let me know when you're home, okay? Something wasn't adding up. I sat down at the dining table, staring at my phone as if willing it to ring. Minutes turned into hours, and still, nothing. My mind spiraled with possibilities, each one worse than the last. I knew I wouldn't find peace until I started piecing together what had happened. That's when I remembered the home security cameras. We had installed them a few years ago after a string of burglaries in the neighborhood. I rushed to my laptop, ignoring the sharp pain in my abdomen, and pulled up the footage from the previous day. My hands trembled as I navigated the timeline, searching for any clue. At first, the footage seemed normal. Vanessa helping me into the car for the hospital, her coming back home with Lily later that evening. But then, something caught my eye. Around noon yesterday, Vanessa and Lily left the house again, this time dressed as if they were going somewhere special. Vanessa wore the red dress I'd bought her for our anniversary, and Lily was in her favorite blue dress, the one she always wore for important occasions. They both looked happy. I rewound the footage, staring at the scene again, hoping I'd missed something. But no, there it was, clear as day. Vanessa leading Lily out the front door, holding her hand with a smile that felt painfully out of place considering where I'd been. My stomach twisted as I watched them get into Vanessa's car and drive away. Where were they going? And why didn't she tell me? I clicked over to the live tracking app we used for Lily's tablet. It wasn't something I checked often, but Vanessa and I had agreed to use it for safety reasons, especially when Lily went on school trips. As I logged in, my breath caught in my throat. The last recorded location wasn't at her school or a friend's house. It was a hotel across town. A hotel? The blood drained from my face as I stared at the screen, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might tear through my chest. The name of the hotel was innocuous enough, but the implications hit me like a freight train. There was no reason for Vanessa to take Lily there. None. Unless I refused to let my thoughts go any further without confirmation. Gritting my teeth against the pain, I grabbed my car keys and headed out the door. The drive to the hotel was a blur of anger, fear, and adrenaline. Every worst-case scenario played out in my head, each one more damning than the last. By the time I pulled into the parking lot, I was shaking. I walked into the lobby, trying to keep my voice steady as I approached the front desk. "Excuse me, I'm looking for my wife. She was here yesterday with my daughter." The clerk, a young man with tired eyes, glanced at me before typing something into his computer. "Do you know the room number?" "No," I snapped, barely keeping my temper in check. "Her name is Vanessa Carter. She had an 8-year-old girl with her." He hesitated, then lowered his voice. "I'm sorry, sir. I can't disclose guest information." I slammed my hand on the counter, ignoring the pain it sent shooting up my arm. Listen, I'm her husband, and I'm not leaving until you tell me where they are. The clerk's face paled, and he quickly checked the screen again. Room 217, he muttered, glancing around nervously. I didn't wait for him to say anything else. My legs carried me down the hallway, each step fueled by a mixture of rage and desperation. When I reached the door to room 217, I froze. My hand hovered over the doorknob, my heart pounding in my ears. This was it, the moment of truth. Summoning every ounce of courage, I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time, until the door creaked open. The room was empty, but the sight inside made my blood run cold. A half-empty bottle of wine sat on the table. Lily's favorite stuffed animal was on the bed, and on the nightstand was Vanessa's purse, next to a wallet I didn't recognize. Damien. The name hit me like a slap to the face. I'd heard it before in passing. A coworker Vanessa had mentioned once or twice. He's just a friend, she'd said, laughing it off. But the evidence in front of me told a different story. They had been here together, with my daughter, and in that moment, something inside me shattered. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, staring at the wreckage of my life, already planning my next move. The drive back home was eerily quiet, even though the storm in my head was deafening. My grip on the steering wheel was so tight my knuckles turned white, but I didn't loosen it. I couldn't. It was the only thing keeping me grounded, the only thing stopping me from breaking down completely. I replayed everything I'd seen in that hotel room over and over again. The wine bottle, Lily's stuffed animal, Vanessa's purse, and that wallet, his wallet. Damien. A name I barely registered before, now etched into my brain like a scar. I didn't need Vanessa to spell it out for me. The truth was already screaming in my face. She'd taken our daughter to meet her lover while I was lying in a hospital bed, recovering from surgery. When I finally pulled into our driveway, I sat in the car for what felt like hours, unable to move. The house loomed in front of me, suddenly unfamiliar, like it belonged to someone else. This wasn't home anymore. It was a shell, a facade of the life I thought I had, a life Vanessa had shattered with one selfish decision. Eventually, I forced myself out of the car and into the house. The first thing I noticed was the smell, her perfume. It hung in the air, a sickly sweet reminder of her presence. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I thought I might break down. But then I heard it, the soft hum of Lily's voice coming from the living room. I followed the sound and found her sitting on the floor, coloring in one of her sketchbooks. She looked up when she saw me, her face lighting up with a smile that made my heart ache. "Daddy!" she exclaimed, dropping her crayons and running to me. I knelt down, wincing as the pain from my surgery flared up, but I didn't care. I wrapped her in a hug, holding her tighter than I ever had before. For a moment, it was just the two of us, and everything felt almost normal. Almost. "Did you have fun yesterday, sweetie?" I asked softly, keeping my voice steady even though my insides were churning. She pulled back and nodded enthusiastically. "Mommy took me to meet her friend. He's really nice. He said he's going to be my new daddy." Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay calm. "What's his name?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "Damien," she said, her tone so innocent it broke my heart all over again. "He gave me this." She held up a small toy, a cheap plastic thing that looked like it came from a vending machine. I smiled weakly and kissed her forehead. "That's nice, sweetheart. Why don't you go finish your drawing?" She nodded and skipped back to her spot on the floor, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside me. I stood there for a moment, watching her, and made a silent vow. I would protect her, no matter what, even if it meant tearing my life apart. The sound of the front door opening snapped me out of my thoughts. Vanessa walked in, her expression calm, as if nothing had happened. She saw me and froze, her smile faltering for just a second before she composed herself. "You're home early," she said, her tone casual, almost dismissive. "I had to leave," I replied, my voice cold. Something didn't feel right. Her eyes flickered with something. Guilt, maybe, or annoyance. But she didn't say anything. Instead, she She set her purse down on the table and walked past me, calling out to Lily. "How was your day with Daddy, sweetheart?" she asked, crouching down to hug her. "It was good," Lily said, beaming. I told him about Damien. Vanessa's body stiffened, just for a moment, before she turned back to me. "Michael, can we talk?" I followed her into the kitchen, my heart pounding as I braced myself for what was coming. She leaned against the counter, her arms crossed, and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I'm going to make this simple," she said, her voice steady but laced with something that sounded like defiance. "Damien and I are in love. I've been unhappy for a long time, Michael, and I deserve to be happy." I stared at her, unable to believe what I was hearing. "Unhappy?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You were unhappy, so you decided to cheat on me? To introduce our daughter to your lover while I was in the hospital?" She sighed, as if I was the one being unreasonable. "You don't understand, Michael. Damien makes me feel alive, and Lily likes him. This is what's best for all of us." "All of us?" I said, my voice shaking with rage. "Do you even hear yourself? You're tearing this family apart, and you think it's for the best?" She rolled her eyes. "Stop being so dramatic. We're getting a divorce, Michael, and I'm taking Lily with me." I laughed bitterly, the sound hollow and cold. "You think you can just walk away and take my daughter? Over my dead body?" Her eyes narrowed. "You can't stop me. I've already spoken to a lawyer. I have every right to take her." Something inside me snapped. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just looked her in the eyes and said, "You've made your choice, Vanessa. Now watch how I make mine." She didn't understand what I meant, not then, but she would. She would learn exactly what it meant to betray me, and she would regret it for the rest of her life. When Vanessa slammed the door on her way out that evening, I stood there, staring at the spot where she'd been. My fists clenched so tightly my nails bit into my palms. My mind was spinning, but one thing was clear. This wasn't going to end on her terms. No, if she wanted a fight, she was about to find out exactly what kind of man she'd underestimated for years. I walked to the window and watched her car pull out of the driveway. Where was she going? Damien's place, probably. It didn't matter. She thought she had all the control, thought she could manipulate the situation and walk away unscathed. But she had forgotten one crucial thing. Lily wasn't a bargaining chip, and I wasn't a man to be crossed. The first thing I did was call a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Evelyn Ross who came highly recommended. I didn't waste time sugarcoating the situation. I laid out everything I knew. The affair, the hotel, the introduction of Damien to my daughter, and Vanessa's bold declaration about taking custody. Evelyn didn't mince words. "This is bad, Michael," she said, her tone blunt but not unkind. "Judges don't look kindly on parents who expose their children to instability, especially during a divorce. If we play our cards right, you could get full custody." Full custody. The words rang in my ears like a lifeline. Vanessa thought she held all the cards, but she'd made a mistake. Several, in fact. She had exposed Lily to a man I didn't trust, a man whose presence in her life wasn't just inappropriate but dangerous. I knew Damien's type, the smooth talker who promised the world but left destruction in his wake. If Vanessa was too blind to see it, then I'd make sure the courts did. Evelyn suggested hiring a private investigator to dig into Damien's past. "If he's got skeletons in his closet, we'll find them," she said. I didn't hesitate. I needed leverage, and I needed it fast. The next few days passed in a blur of quiet determination, while Vanessa carried on as if nothing was wrong, taking Lily to school and playing the doting mother. I was working behind the scenes to dismantle her plans. I combed through every piece of documentation I had, bank statements, credit card records, phone bills, looking for patterns or evidence of her deceit. I found plenty. There were charges I didn't recognize, expensive dinners, hotel stays, even a flight to a city I'd never been to. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. Every receipt, every transaction was another nail in the coffin of her credibility. Meanwhile, the private investigator, an older man named Howard with a gruff demeanor and a reputation for being relentless, was uncovering Damien's secrets. It didn't take long for the dirt to start piling up. Damien had a history of financial fraud, a string of failed businesses, and, most alarmingly, allegations of domestic abuse from a previous relationship. The police reports were damning, even if no charges had been filed. When Howard handed me the file, I felt a grim satisfaction. Damien wasn't just untrustworthy, he was dangerous. And Vanessa had brought this man into my daughter's life without a second thought. Armed with this information, I began to prepare for the custody battle. Evelyn was meticulous, helping me craft a narrative that highlighted my dedication as a father and Vanessa's reckless behavior. We compiled everything: the hotel visit, the financial records, Damien's past, and built a case so airtight that not even Vanessa's lawyer could poke holes in it. But it wasn't just about the courts. I needed to make sure Vanessa understood exactly what she had done. She needed to feel the weight of her betrayal, to know that her actions had consequences. I started by moving all our joint accounts into a trust for Lily. Every dollar was accounted for, untouchable by Vanessa or anyone else. I wasn't about to let her siphon off our savings to fund her new life with Damien. Then I filed for temporary custody, citing Damien's dangerous history and Vanessa's irresponsible decision to involve him in Lily's life. The court granted it almost immediately, and Vanessa was served with the paperwork 2 days later. The explosion I had been waiting for finally came. Vanessa stormed into the house, her face red with fury, waving the custody order like it was a personal insult. "What the hell is this, Michael?" she demanded, her voice shaking with rage. "It's exactly what it looks like," I said calmly, meeting her gaze without flinching. "You endangered Lily by introducing her to a man like Damien. I'm not letting you take her away from me." Her eyes widened in disbelief. "You're blowing this out of proportion. Damien isn't dangerous. He loves me, and he loves Lily." I laughed bitterly. "He loves himself, Vanessa. Did you know about his record? About the fraud, the abuse allegations? Or were you too blinded by whatever fantasy he sold you?" She faltered, the confidence draining from her face. "That's not true. Damien would never." "Save it," I interrupted. "I have the reports, Vanessa. Court documents, police records. The judge is going to see them, too. This isn't about you or Damien. This is about Lily, and I'll do whatever it takes to protect her." For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw fear in her eyes. She opened her mouth to argue but stopped herself, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "You're going to regret this, Michael," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "I swear you'll regret this." But I didn't. Not then, and not later. Because at that moment, I knew I was finally taking back control. And Vanessa? She had no idea what was coming. The day of the custody hearing arrived, and I was ready. Every detail, every shred of evidence, every piece of my shattered trust had been meticulously prepared and was now sitting in a thick file on the desk in front of me. The courtroom felt colder than I had expected, its walls towering over us like silent judges. I sat in my chair, hands folded tightly, forcing myself to appear calm despite the storm of emotions swirling inside me. Vanessa entered the courtroom with the same confidence she always carried, but it was different this time. Forced, hollow. She was dressed sharply, her lawyer by her side, but there was a nervousness in her step, a hesitancy in her eyes when they briefly met mine. I didn't smile. I didn't nod. I simply watched her sit down at the other table, the very picture of betrayal. The judge, an older man with sharp eyes and an air of authority, entered, and the proceedings began. Vanessa's lawyer spoke first, spinning a tale that made my stomach churn. According to him, Vanessa was a loving, devoted mother who had sacrificed everything for Lily's happiness. The affair? Irrelevant. Damien? A kind man who was good to children. They painted me as the bitter, vindictive husband who was using the courts to punish Vanessa for leaving me. It was hard to sit there and listen to that nonsense. My jaw clenched tighter with every word, but Evelyn had warned me not to react. "Let them dig their own hole," she had said. So I waited, hands gripping the arms of my chair until my knuckles turned white. When it was our turn, Evelyn stood with a calm authority that immediately commanded the room. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steady but firm, "this case is not about a failed marriage. It's about the safety and well-being of an innocent child." She proceeded to lay out our case, piece by piece. First came the financial records, hotel receipts, expensive dinners, and trips that Vanessa had charged to our joint account, all while I was recovering from surgery. Then came the security footage of Vanessa leaving the house with Lily, dressed as if they were heading to a family gathering, only to take her to a hotel to meet Damien. The judge's face remained stoic, but I could see the faintest flicker of disapproval in his eyes. And then came the bombshell, Damien's past. Evelyn handed the judge a thick folder containing police reports, restraining orders, and testimonies from Damien's ex-partners. "Your Honor," she said, her voice sharper now. "This is the man the respondent brought into her daughter's life without any regard for his history or the potential danger he poses." The room was silent as the judge flipped through the documents, his expression growing graver with each page. Vanessa's lawyer tried to object, claiming the reports were irrelevant or unsubstantiated, but Evelyn didn't let up. She painted a clear, damning picture of Vanessa's recklessness, her willingness to prioritize her own desires over Lily's safety. Finally, it was my turn to speak. I took a deep breath and stood, every nerve in my body on edge. I wasn't a public speaker. I wasn't a man of grand gestures or dramatic speeches. But this wasn't about me. It was about Lily. "Your Honor," I began, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat, "I'm not here to air grievances about my marriage. I'm here because I love my daughter more than anything in this world. And I'm terrified of what might happen to her if she's left in an environment where her safety isn't the top priority." I looked directly at the judge, my hands gripping the edge of the podium. Vanessa introduced our daughter to Damien without telling me, without considering his history. She didn't think about what kind of man she was exposing Lily to. And now, she's asking the court to entrust Lily's future to someone who has already shown he's capable of harm. I can't let that happen. There was a pause after I finished, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the room. I sat down, my heart pounding, and avoided looking at Vanessa. I couldn't bear to see whatever expression was on her face. Vanessa was called to testify next, and it was clear she was flustered. Her usual composure was slipping, and the judge's pointed questions didn't help. "Mrs. Carter," he said, his tone measured but firm, "why didn't you disclose Damien's history to the court?" Vanessa stammered, her voice faltering. I didn't think it was relevant. Damien isn't dangerous. Those reports are from years ago. And yet you didn't feel it was important to inform Mr. Carter that you were introducing his daughter to this man?" the judge pressed. Her response was weak, her excuses flimsy. By the time she finished, even her lawyer looked exasperated. The judge called a short recess before delivering his decision. Those minutes felt like hours. I sat there, staring at the empty bench, my mind racing with every possible outcome. Would the judge see through Vanessa's lies? Would he believe me? Or would I lose Lily forever? When the judge returned, the courtroom fell silent. His voice was steady, but there was no mistaking the sternness in his tone as he addressed Vanessa. "Mrs. Carter, the court finds your actions highly irresponsible. You failed to prioritize your daughter's safety and well-being, and you exposed her to a man with a concerning history without informing Mr. Carter or the court." He turned to me next, his expression softening just slightly. "Mr. Carter, the court recognizes your dedication as a father and your efforts to ensure your daughter's safety. Effective immediately, primary custody of Lily is awarded to you. Mrs. Carter will have supervised visitation rights until the court determines otherwise." Relief washed over me, so overwhelming I thought I might collapse. Vanessa looked like she'd been slapped, her face pale and her hands trembling. I didn't gloat. I didn't even look at her. All I could think about was Lily, my sweet, innocent Lily, and the fact that she was safe. When I walked out of that courtroom, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. This wasn't the end of the fight, but it was a victory, one that meant everything. I had barely stepped out of the courthouse when the weight of everything hit me like a tidal wave. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of relief, but it was fragile, like glass on the verge of shattering. The victory wasn't about me, it was about Lily. My daughter was safe, and that was all that mattered. Still, the battle wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I knew Vanessa wouldn't accept the court's decision without a fight. The storm hit sooner than I expected. That evening, Vanessa showed up at the house, uninvited. Her face a mask of fury and desperation. She stood on the porch, banging on the door like a woman possessed, shouting for me to let her in. "Michael!" she screamed, her voice breaking. "You can't do this. You can't keep her from me." I didn't move at first. I stood in the living room, staring at the door, my heart pounding in my chest. Lily was upstairs, blissfully unaware of the chaos unfolding below. I couldn't let Vanessa disturb her peace, not after everything she had been through. Finally, I opened the door, but only partway. I kept the chain lock in place, a physical barrier between us that felt symbolic of everything that now separated us. "Go home, Vanessa," I said, my voice low but firm. Her eyes were wild, her face streaked with tears. "You can't do this to me, Michael. I'm her mother." "You stopped being her mother the moment you put her in harm's way," I replied. My tone as cold as the January air around us. "The court made its decision, Vanessa. You need to respect it." She pushed against the door, the chain rattling as she tried to force her way in. "You don't understand. Damien's gone. He left me." The words spilled out in a rush, her voice cracking with desperation. "He said he couldn't handle the drama, and now I have nothing." "Nothing, Michael." I stared at her, unmoved. "That's not my problem," I said, my voice like steel. "You made your choices, Vanessa. You chose Damien over your family. Now you're dealing with the consequences." Her shoulders sagged, and for a moment, she looked utterly defeated. But then her face hardened, and she glared at me with a venom I hadn't seen before. "You think you've won, don't you?" she spat. "You think you can just take Lily and erase me from her life? She'll never forgive you for this. One day, she'll see what you've done, and she'll hate you for it." I felt the anger rise in me, but I forced it down. This wasn't about her, and I refused to stoop to her level. "Good night, Vanessa," I said, closing the door in her face. I stood there for a long moment, my hand still on the doorknob, listening as her footsteps retreated down the porch. When I was sure she was gone, I locked the door and leaned against it, letting out a shaky breath. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Vanessa's life continued to unravel, and the fallout was impossible to ignore. Word spread quickly about the custody case and Damien's sordid past. Friends who had once admired Vanessa's charisma began to distance themselves, unwilling to associate with the scandal. Her job, her one source of stability, was the next casualty. Damien had been a business associate of hers, and when his fraudulent dealings came to light, the company couldn't ignore her connection to him. She was let go quietly, with a severance package that wouldn't last long. I heard about all of this through the grapevine. Mutual friends called to tell me what was happening, their voices tinged with pity. I didn't feel pity. I felt vindication. Vanessa tried to fight back, of course. She filed appeals, claiming the court's decision was unfair, that she had been misrepresented. But every attempt was shot down. The evidence against her was overwhelming, and no judge was willing to overlook her blatant disregard for Lily's well-being. She tried to reach out to me again, calling late at night, leaving voicemails that ranged from tearful apologies to angry tirades. I listened to the first few, curious to see if she had anything meaningful to say. She didn't. It was all self-pity and excuses. Eventually, I stopped listening altogether. Her number went straight to voicemail, and her messages were deleted without a second thought. One night, she showed up at the house again, this time calmer, more subdued. She stood on the porch, shivering in the cold, and when I opened the door, she looked up at me with hollow eyes. "Michael," she said softly, her voice trembling, "please, I just want to see her. Just for a minute." I shook my head. "You know the rules, Vanessa. Supervised visits only. You want to see Lily? Talk to the court-appointed monitor." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I thought she might argue. But she didn't. She just nodded, her shoulders slumping as she turned to leave. As I watched her walk away, a part of me felt a pang of something. Regret, maybe, or sadness for what we had lost. But it was fleeting. Whatever bond we had once shared was gone, shattered by her betrayal. My focus was on Lily now, on giving her the stable, loving home she deserved. Vanessa's downfall wasn't my victory. It was her own doing. She had made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. All I could do was move forward, one step at a time, and make sure Lily never had to suffer for her mother's mistakes. It's strange how silence can feel like both a curse and a blessing. For weeks, the house had been filled with tension, arguments, and the sharp sting of betrayal. Now, it was quiet, almost too quiet, but the kind of quiet I could get used to. It was the sound of peace, of starting over. Lily adjusted better than I expected. At 8 years old, she was more perceptive than I gave her credit for. She noticed Vanessa's absence, but didn't ask too many questions. I told her the truth in a way she could understand. Mommy made some decisions that weren't safe for us, so she's going to have to follow some rules before she can see you again. Lily nodded thoughtfully and didn't press further. She seemed content with that explanation, trusting that I was doing what was best for her. I focused on creating a routine that would make her feel secure. Mornings became our special time. I'd wake her up with her favorite breakfast, pancakes with smiley faces drawn in syrup, and we'd talk about her plans for the day. She'd tell me about school, her friends, and the drawings she was working on. Her laughter, light and carefree, began to fill the house again, and it became my favorite sound in the world. Her drawings also started to change. She used to draw pictures of the three of us, Vanessa, Lily, and me, holding hands, smiling. But now, her drawings were of just the two of us. She'd sketch me cooking while she colored at the table, or the two of us playing in the park. Each drawing was a reminder that we were moving forward, building something new out of the pieces Vanessa had left behind. Starting over wasn't easy, though. There were moments when I felt the weight of it all pressing down on me, when the anger and sadness threatened to pull me under. Nights were the hardest. Once Lily was asleep, the house felt too big, too empty. I'd sit in the living room, staring at the photographs on the walls, the ones that still had Vanessa in them. Part of me wanted to take them down, to erase her from our lives entirely, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. She was still Lily's mother, and no matter how much I resented her, I knew I had to honor that for Lily's sake. To cope, I threw myself into being the best father I could be. I learned how to braid Lily's hair, messily at first, but I got better with practice. I volunteered at her school, chaperoning field trips and helping out at events. I even started coaching her soccer team, despite knowing absolutely nothing about the game. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up, being present, and letting Lily know she could count on me. We also moved. The house we'd lived in with Vanessa held too many memories, too many ghosts. I found a smaller place in a quiet neighborhood, with a big backyard where Lily could play. She loved it immediately, especially the swing set I installed for her. Watching her laugh as she soared through the air, her hair flying behind her, felt like a victory. A small but significant step toward reclaiming our happiness. The new neighborhood also meant new friends for both of us. Lily quickly bonded with a group of kids from the block, while I found myself striking up conversations with their parents. One of them, a kind woman named Rachel, became a close friend. She was a single mom with 2 boys, and we often found ourselves swapping stories about the challenges of parenting. Rachel's empathy and warmth were a balm I didn't know I needed. She never pried, never asked too many questions about Vanessa, but her presence reminded me that I wasn't alone in this. There were still challenges, of course. Vanessa wasn't completely out of the picture. The supervised visits started a month after the court ruling, and while I respected the arrangement, they were difficult for both Lily and me. Vanessa's attempts to reconnect with Lily felt forced, as if she were trying too hard to make up for her mistakes. Lily would come home from those visits quiet and withdrawn, and it took all my strength not to let my frustration show. Instead, I'd focus on comforting her, reassuring her that she was safe and loved. One night, after a particularly difficult visit, Lily climbed into my lap and looked up at me with wide, teary eyes. "Daddy," she said softly, "why doesn't Mommy live with us anymore?" My heart broke a little at her question, but I kept my voice steady. "Because sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, sweetie. And when they do, they have to work hard to fix them. Mommy's trying to fix her mistakes, but until she does, it's my job to keep you safe." She nodded, her small hands gripping my shirt. "I like it when it's just us," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I hugged her tightly, fighting back tears. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. In those quiet moments, I realized that starting over wasn't just about rebuilding my life. It was about giving Lily the stability and love she deserved. It wasn't easy, and there were days when the pain of what Vanessa had done felt like it would never fully go away. But every laugh, every hug, every shared moment with Lily reminded me that we were going to be okay. We weren't just surviving. We were thriving. And that was the greatest victory of all. 8. Vanessa's desperation. Vanessa's calls began as an annoyance. Late-night voicemails filled with half-hearted apologies, angry outbursts, and pleas for me to reconsider the court's decision. I ignored them, knowing that engaging would only open the door to more chaos. But when she realized I wasn't going to respond, her desperation grew louder, uglier. One night, the phone rang at 2 a.m. I groaned, reaching for it instinctively before stopping myself. I stared at the screen, Vanessa's name glowing brightly in the darkened room. Part of me wanted to answer, to demand she leave me and Lily alone, but I didn't. Instead, I silenced the phone and went back to bed. The next morning, I checked the voicemail out of morbid curiosity. Her voice was frantic, trembling with emotion as she spoke. "Michael, please. I need to talk to you. I made a mistake. Okay? Damien's gone. He left me, and I'm all alone. I just want to see Lily. Please, Michael, don't shut me out. I'll do anything." I deleted the message. I wasn't interested in her crocodile tears or her newfound remorse. She wasn't sorry for what she had done. She was sorry for the consequences. She had gambled with our family, and she'd lost. That wasn't my problem anymore. But Vanessa wasn't one to give up easily. A few days later, she showed up at Lily's school. It was during pickup time, and I had just arrived when I spotted her standing near the gate. She was dressed sharply, her makeup flawless, as if she thought appearances alone could sway me. When she saw me, she waved and started walking over, a bright smile plastered on her face. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, forcing myself to stay calm. Lily was running toward the car, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders, completely oblivious to the storm brewing behind her. "Lily," Vanessa called out, her voice sickly sweet. "Come give Mommy a hug." Lily froze, her eyes darting between me and Vanessa. "Daddy?" she asked hesitantly, her small hand gripping the car door. I stepped out of the car, placing myself between them. "Vanessa, this is not the time or place," I said firmly. She ignored me, her focus solely on Lily. "Sweetheart, I've missed you so much. Don't you want to spend some time with Mommy?" Lily looked at me, confused and unsure. "Can I, Daddy?" "No," I said, my voice firm but not unkind. "We've talked about this, remember? Mommy has to follow the rules if she wants to see you." Vanessa's face darkened, and for a moment, I thought she might lash out. But then she forced a smile, crouching down to Lily's level. "I'm trying, sweetie. I really am. But Daddy's being difficult." "Vanessa," I snapped, my patience wearing thin. "Stop. Now." She stood, her expression hardening. "This isn't over, Michael," she hissed. "You can't keep her from me forever." "I'm not keeping her from you." "The court is," I replied coldly. "Now leave before I call the police." She glared at me, her jaw tightening, but she didn't argue. With one last look at Lily, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement. I watched her go, my chest tight with a mixture of anger and relief. When she was finally out of sight, I turned to Lily and crouched down to her level. "You okay, sweetheart?" I asked gently. She nodded, though her eyes were watery. "Why does Mommy say you're being mean?" I sighed, brushing a strand of hair out of her face. "Because Mommy doesn't like the rules we have to follow right now. But those rules are there to keep you safe, and that's the most important thing." Lily nodded slowly, her little hand slipping into mine. "Okay, Daddy." That night, I received another voicemail from Vanessa. Her tone was different this time. Less angry, more broken. "Michael, I don't know what to do anymore. I've lost everything. Damien's gone. My friends don't talk to me, and now I can't even see Lily. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But please, don't punish me like this. Don't take her away from me." I deleted it without hesitation. Her words didn't move me. They only confirmed what I already knew. Vanessa wasn't sorry for what she'd done. She was sorry for what she'd lost. She wanted to undo the consequences of her actions without taking responsibility for them. But life didn't work that way. Over the next few weeks, her desperation escalated. She sent letters, emails, even tried showing up at our old friends' houses, hoping they'd mediate on her behalf. But none of it worked. I had made my decision, and the court had backed me up. Lily was my priority now, and I wasn't going to let Vanessa's guilt or manipulation get in the way of that. Vanessa's downfall wasn't just about losing Lily or Damien. It was about losing the image she had crafted for herself. She had always been the one in control, the one who called the shots. Now, she was adrift, clinging to the wreckage of her own choices, and there was nothing I could do to save her. But the truth was, I didn't want to save her. My focus was on Lily and the fresh start we were building together. Vanessa had made her bed. Now, she had to lie in it. Life began to settle into a new rhythm, one that revolved around Lily and me. The days felt lighter, freer, and the wounds Vanessa had inflicted started to heal, slowly but surely. Our new home became a sanctuary, a place filled with laughter, love, and moments that reminded me of what really mattered. It wasn't easy to rebuild from the rubble she left behind, but every step forward felt like a small victory. Lily thrived in this new chapter. She adjusted to her new school, made new friends, and even started talking about joining the art club. Her drawings, once a reflection of confusion and loss, now radiated joy. She drew pictures of us at the park, of our new house, of her favorite moments. I kept every single one, knowing they were milestones of our healing journey. One afternoon, as we sat together in the backyard, I watched Lily swing higher and higher, her laughter carrying on the breeze. I had installed that swing set myself, pouring my energy and emotions into every bolt and beam. It wasn't just a swing. It was a symbol of the life I was building for us, a life that Vanessa could no longer taint. "Daddy," Lily called out, her legs kicking as she swung back and forth, "can we go to the park tomorrow? I want to draw the lake." "Of course, sweetheart," I replied, smiling. "We'll make a whole day of it." Moments like these were what I clung to, the proof that we were moving forward. But even as we built this new life, the shadow of Vanessa lingered. Supervised visits were still part of the court order, and though Lily approached them with cautious optimism, I could see the toll they took on her. She'd come home quieter, her smile a little dimmer, as if Vanessa's presence was a weight she couldn't quite shake. One evening, after a particularly tense visit, Lily climbed onto my lap as I sat on the couch. Her small hands played with the buttons of my shirt as she spoke in a soft voice. "Daddy, do I have to see Mommy every week?" I hesitated, the question hitting me harder than I expected. "For now, yes, sweetheart. The court says it's important for you to spend time with her." "But I don't like it," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's not like it used to be. She's different." I wrapped my arms around her, holding her close. "I know, Lily, and I promise, if it ever feels too hard or scary, you can tell me, okay? I'll always listen." She nodded against my chest, and we sat there in silence, the weight of her words hanging between us. It was moments like these that reminded me of the responsibility I carried, not just to protect Lily, but to guide her through the complexities of her emotions, to help her understand that it was okay to feel hurt, confused, or even angry. As time passed, Vanessa's presence in our lives became less of a looming threat and more of a distant echo. Her desperation to regain control faded as reality set in. The court's rulings were firm, and her attempts to manipulate the system bore no fruit. She eventually stopped calling, stopped writing, and for the first time in months, I felt the weight of her influence lift entirely. Lily and I continued to thrive. We spent weekends exploring parks, museums, and anywhere that sparked her creativity. One day, as we walked along a quiet trail near the lake, she reached up and took my hand. "Daddy," she said, looking up at me with a smile, "we're happy, aren't we?" I knelt down to her level, looking into her bright, innocent eyes. "We are, Lily. We really are." That moment stayed with me, a simple affirmation of everything we had fought for. Vanessa's betrayal had been a painful chapter in our lives, but it was just that, a chapter. It didn't define us, and it certainly didn't dictate our future. The final piece of closure came unexpectedly. Months after the custody battle ended, I received a letter from Vanessa. It was handwritten, the once familiar curves of her writing bringing back a flood of memories. I debated whether to read it, but eventually opened it, curious to see what she had to say. In the letter, she apologized, not just for what she had done, but for how deeply she had hurt Lily and me. She admitted her mistakes, acknowledging the pain she had caused and the consequences she now lived with. It wasn't an attempt to win me back or regain custody. It was simply a confession, a way for her to unburden herself. "I know I can't undo the past," she wrote, "but I hope someday Lily can forgive me. And maybe in time, you can too." I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Forgiveness, if it ever came, would be on my terms, not hers. But reading her words gave me a sense of finality, a confirmation that we had both moved on in our own ways. Life continued, steady and full of promise. Lily grew more confident, her laughter more frequent, her joy unrestrained. And I found peace in the simple moments, watching her draw, hearing her giggle, holding her hand as we walked through the world we were rebuilding together. Vanessa's choices had shattered the life we once knew, but they had also paved the way for something new, something stronger. Our story wasn't defined by betrayal or loss. It was defined by resilience, by love, and by the unwavering bond between a father and his daughter. As I watched Lily swing higher and higher in the backyard, her laughter ringing out like a melody, I felt a sense of closure. We had faced the storm, weathered its fury, and come out the other side. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were living, thriving, and looking forward to the next chapter, together.